In a luxurious restaurant known for its elegance and refinement, the air was often filled with the scent of fine dining and the hum of polite conversation. But on one particular evening, everything shifted the moment a wealthy, arrogant man walked through the doors. His presence wasn't just loud, it was unbearable. Waiters scattered, unable to endure his cruelty, and guests lowered their eyes to avoid confrontation. Just when it seemed no one dared stand in his way, a new face appeared. A young black woman hired only days before stepped forward. What happened next would not only silence the room, but rewrite the meaning of courage, dignity, and justice. If you're intrigued by what happens next, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful stories like this. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in her place? The Grand Oak Hotel was a place of elegance and wealth, where marble floors gleamed and crystal chandeliers sparkled above guests who spoke in hushed, sophisticated tones. It was here that businessmen sealed million-dollar deals, celebrities sought privacy, and the elite indulged in the kind of luxury most people could only dream of. Yet behind the beauty of the lobby and the perfect service, staff members whispered about a man whose name brought tension to the air. Richard Kingsley. A billionaire known for his temper, his arrogance, and his ability to make grown men shake with just a glare, Kingsley had developed a reputation as the guest no one wanted to serve. He wasn't just demanding, he was unbearable, cruel in ways that cut deep, always reminding the staff of their place. Waiters who drew the unlucky assignment of his table often left in tears or quit the very same day. On a chilly Friday evening, Richard reserved the hotel's most exclusive dining suite, requesting a full team of waiters at his service. At first, no one dared refuse, but as the hour drew near, one by one the staff found excuses to vanish, leaving the head manager in panic. By the time Richard entered, dressed in his expensive tailored suit and carrying the aura of superiority he wore like a crown, the suite was nearly empty. Only a handful of trembling staff remained, and they too slipped away under the weight of his sharp insults and impossible demands. That night, when it seemed no one was left willing to serve the tyrant billionaire, a new hire stepped forward. She was young, calm, and composed. Her name was Maya, a black woman who had only been working at the hotel for a week. While everyone else fled from the storm Richard carried with him, Maya decided to face it head-on, not knowing that her courage would change the course of the evening and expose truths the billionaire had long kept buried. Maya adjusted her apron as she stepped into the dining suite, the heavy silence pressing against her shoulders. The billionaire sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a glass of wine in his hand, swirling it as if the room itself should be grateful for his presence. His eyes narrowed when he noticed her. Richard Kingsley was used to people bowing, trembling, scrambling to please him. But this new waitress, with her steady walk and quiet dignity, didn't shrink under his gaze. Instead, she stood tall, placing a napkin before him with the same calm she would offer to any guest. At first, Richard tried the usual tricks. He made cutting remarks about her lack of refinement, mocked the hotel for scraping the bottom of the barrel, and ordered her to fetch things he didn't need just to watch her run. But Maya didn't break. Each insult rolled off her like water on stone. She returned promptly, setting dishes before him with care, never allowing her expression to betray the sting of his words. This only fueled his irritation. He was a man who thrived on control, who fed on the fear of others. Yet here was someone refusing to give him the satisfaction. The other staff whispered from the hallway, peeking in, unable to believe what they were witnessing. No one had ever lasted this long serving Richard Kingsley. Most waiters didn't make it past the first round of his venom. Maya, however, moved through the room with an unshakable grace. She remembered the words her grandmother once told her. Some storms are loudest before they break, but if you stand firm, they pass. The tension deepened when Richard escalated his cruelty. He demanded that Maya play the role of entertainer, commanding her to recite hotel policies, criticize the cooks, even humiliate herself to keep him amused. His words dripped with condescension, laced with the subtle venom of prejudice. "People like you should know their place," he sneered, his voice low enough for her to hear but sharp enough to cut. The words echoed in the air, heavy with the kind of insult that carried centuries of weight. For the first time, Maya paused. She looked at him, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of someone who had endured much worse and had chosen not to let it define her. The silence unsettled him more than any outburst could have. Richard slammed his glass down on the table, demanding she react, demanding she crumble. But Maya remained still, her calm presence exposing the emptiness of his cruelty. By now, whispers about the confrontation had spread through the hotel. Staff members who had fled earlier gathered near the doorway, drawn by a strange magnetism. Guests passing through the hall stopped, curious about the commotion. Slowly, the suite that had once been Richard's private stage became a quiet theater, with Maya standing firmly in the spotlight. Each insult he hurled revealed less about her and more about him, his need to dominate, his bitterness, his reliance on fear. All of it cracked under the weight of her silence, and while he tried to bury her under his arrogance, something unexpected began to happen. Those watching no longer saw Richard Kingsley, the billionaire, untouchable in his power. They saw a man exposed, desperate, unraveling in the face of a young black woman who refused to bend. The balance of power in the room was shifting, and Richard could feel it slipping from his grasp. What began as another evening of indulgent cruelty was transforming into a battle he never expected to fight. A battle of dignity versus dominance, respect versus oppression. And for the first time in years, Richard Kingsley wasn't sure he would win. The suite had grown unbearably tense, the air thick with expectation. Richard leaned forward, his face red with fury, as if sheer intimidation could force Maya into submission. He barked orders that made no sense, demanding dishes that weren't on the menu, criticizing her movements, mocking her accent. His voice rose until it echoed against the walls, but Maya stood unshaken, each insult met with quiet composure. Finally, Richard played his most venomous card. He raised his voice so the entire staff lingering outside could hear. "This hotel is ruined," he declared. "Hiring people like her? It's a disgrace. She should be cleaning the floors, not standing in front of me pretending she belongs." A ripple of shock spread through the room. The words hung heavy, their ugliness undeniable. Staff members who had endured Richard's cruelty for years clenched their fists, their silence no longer out of fear, but out of anticipation. They watched Maya closely, wondering if this would be the moment she broke. But instead of retreating, Maya stepped closer to Richard, her presence steady and unflinching. She placed the silver tray on the table and folded her hands gently in front of her. Her voice, when it came, was calm and steady, so calm it cut through the chaos like a blade. "You can strip away titles, wealth, and power," she said evenly, "but what's left is character. And character is the one thing money can't buy. Tonight, everyone here has seen yours." The room fell silent. Richard's jaw tightened, but he couldn't form a response. His usual weapons, insults, intimidation, arrogance, had lost their edge. In that moment, the billionaire who once commanded fear looked small, cornered not by authority, but by truth. Gasps and murmurs echoed from the doorway. Some staff members exchanged glances, emboldened by Maya's fearlessness. Others nodded quietly, relief spreading across their faces as though years of silent humiliation had just been named aloud. Richard slammed his fist onto the table, sending the silverware rattling. But no one flinched. Not Maya, not the staff. not even the guests who had gathered to witness the spectacle. His power had always depended on fear, and now, fear was gone. For the first time in his life, Richard Kingsley realized that money couldn't silence dignity, and cruelty couldn't conquer courage. And in that instant, the empire he had built on intimidation began to crumble. When Richard stormed out of the hotel that night, the sound of his heavy footsteps was no longer accompanied by fearful silence. Instead, it was followed by whispers of relief, then applause. Soft at first, but building as the staff, and even some of the guests recognized what had just happened. For years, he had bullied his way through this place, humiliating those he believed were beneath him. Yet in a single evening, Maya had dismantled the illusion of his power. The staff, once timid and withdrawn, began to gather around Maya. For the first time, they looked not just at her as the new girl, but as a symbol of strength, someone who had stood where others had faltered. The head waiter, usually the first to vanish when Richard entered, placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. His eyes carried the weight of countless silent humiliations, but also gratitude, for showing them it was possible to stand tall. Word of the confrontation spread quickly, not just within the hotel, but beyond its walls. Guests spoke of the evening with awe, retelling how a wealthy man known for his cruelty had been silenced by dignity and truth. Soon, management had no choice but to address Richard's behavior. He wasn't banned. Men like him rarely faced real consequences, but the staff was given new assurances. No one would ever again be forced to endure such treatment without support. But for Maya, it wasn't about policy changes or whispered recognition. It was about reclaiming her place in a world that constantly tried to shrink her. She hadn't come to the city to make a statement, but life had given her the chance to do so, and she had taken it with courage. Her act of defiance wasn't just for herself. It was for every worker who had been dismissed because of their skin, their accent, or their background. It was for every person who had been told to know their place. Maya had proven that dignity doesn't need permission, and courage doesn't require status. And so the question remained, not for Richard, but for everyone who had witnessed it. When cruelty parades as power, will we walk away in silence, or will we finally stand and face it? Because sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the one that shouts, it's the one that refuses to bow.